I am so excited to talk about this movie today. This is La La Land, which is written and directed by Damien Chazelle. This is only his third feature film, which to me is really remarkable, but I think he really started to come into his own and people started to take notice of him when he directed the film Whiplash, which is a very abrasive, but I think a spectacular piece of work. And you could see in that film that Chazelle really he's very musical. He has a very musical eye. That film obviously was about a jazz drummer, and the jazz sequences in that film to me was like something out of Raging Bull, just really electrifying, very adrenaline infused sequences that I was just wowed by. So when I found out that he was making a musical, I expected a lot from him, and of course he surpassed all my expectations. This movie is like cinematic intercourse for me because I don't know how many people know, but musicals, film musicals are kind of my first love and probably the genre I know the most about, or at least one of them. And like this up here is like an encyclopedia for musicals from the 30s through the 50s, RKO canon, the MGM Technicolor musicals. And that's pretty much the time frame. Of course they do, use a lot of 60s musical references as well, but pretty much that's the time frame that this film is paying homage to. So basically this movie is like porn to me. This movie is like a modern day Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which if you don't know what that is, that's a French musical that came out in the 60s, and that is to me one of the best musicals ever made. La La Land is just that. It's this very sumptuous, radiant musical throwback that is just completely seamless in its pacing and the way it flows from scene to scene, from song to song. I love that it's bittersweet. It's not just one-dimensional, smiley, happy. It's a nostalgic tribute to a lot of the, the golden age of musicals, basically, but it also has that very wistful quality, remembering what once was and will never be again. This movie is about Mia, who is played by Emma Stone, and she is an actress living in Los Angeles. She's constantly going from audition to audition and constantly getting turned down, and she meets this jazz pianist named Sebastian, played by Ryan Gosling. And he also is a guy who is really wanting to fulfill his dream as a jazz pianist, really kind of bring back the old school music of that era, and nobody really wants to listen to it, or at least in this day and age, there's not much of a place for that. So you have these two characters that are very much romanticizing nostalgia, and the film really uses that juxtaposition between the fantasy and reality. And they use it in all kinds of different ways. I love how all kinds of aspects of the film are capturing that juxtaposition. Everything from the color palette to the actual characters themselves, the songs. While I'm watching the movie, I'm thinking about all those great musicals I used to grow up with and how this film honors them in such a great way. I'm thinking about all of the films of Vincent Minnelli, and American in Paris is a big one that I kept thinking about here. I'm thinking about the Gene Kelly, Stanley Donen collaborations like Singin' in the Rain, the Busby Berkeley films, and of course the wonderful RKO musicals of Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, the list just goes on and on. I love the fact that so many of the musical sequences are done in single takes. Do you know how long I've been waiting for something like that? Nowadays, when you see dance numbers, it's like every 0.5 second, you're cutting and doing all this stuff. And to me, I feel like, no, I want to watch the dancer perform. I want to see the story unfold. I don't need the camera to be doing a lot of the work because the dancer is doing the work. And finally, this film does that. And so that just really made me happy because Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, people like that prided themselves on doing these one-take performances. And you might think that having all of these nostalgic references coming up on the screen, you might think that it might take you out of it, but quite the contrary, at least for me. To me, I actually think that that's what makes the film work because the movie is very, very, very conscious of the artifice. It's conscious of the conceits. The fantasy aspect is very important so that when the kind of the red velvet curtain is pulled back, that pain and that dullness of reality feels all the more bittersweet. And this movie is, to me, very similar to Whiplash, Chazelle's previous work, and they're very, very different in tone, but they share a lot of the same core themes. Both films are about chasing dreams and wanting something so badly and learning that sacrifices have to be made if you really want success. And the price of achieving success leads to a lot of compromises. As I said, the film reminds me so much of Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and especially the story itself, but And then, of course, I find out that it's Chazelle's favorite movie of all time, which obviously, makes total sense. But what I love about it is the way that it kind of mimics the color palette. In the film here, La La Land, is very similar to Umbrellas of Cherbourg in that it's got a very kind of pastelish, very dulled color palette compared to a lot of those MGM Technicolor musicals that are real bright and just pop off the screen. It has this kind of melancholy feel to it. And even the way the musical numbers begin and end has just that tinge of bitterness. You take the very first dance number, which is just spectacular. It's all done in one take, and it's all of these people just sitting in traffic, in LA traffic. And then from there, the music starts and they all get out of their cars and dance, and the music ends with just honking horns and they all get back in their cars. So you have this wonderful moment, and then all of a sudden, back to reality. Then you have the second number with Emma Stone, and that one also reminds me a lot of Sweet Charity from the 1960s, the Shirley MacLaine, Chita Rivera musical number. And then, it's big, big, very fun. And then it cuts immediately to Emma Stone going outside this party and realizing that her car has been towed. A lot of the romantic moments or romantic numbers are interrupted by cell phones. And I just love that. And Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone are wonderful together. They do have great chemistry. That does remind me a bit of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, maybe not on that level of charisma, but they honor them well. If I actually had to have one complaint about the movie, it would be the character of Ryan Gosling and his performance. I really didn't buy the transition between the two of them, where he starts out being very annoyed by her, and then he starts to kind of flirt with her, and then he falls in love with her. To me, especially going from annoyed to flirting, was a little bit too abrupt. And I think that Ryan Gosling, he's very good at playing kind of very cold, tense characters that have that distance. But he's never been somebody that really sells vulnerability to me in a convincing way, and I just never really bought the arc. But from Emma Stone, I really did. I thought she was just luminous in this film. Every moment she sold perfectly, and you fall in love with her. She has that kind of that blend of quirky, kind of innocent, but fun and emotional. She reminds me, actually, in this movie, reminds me a lot of Barbra Streisand and Funny Girl, Fanny Brice. I mean, to me, one of the great musical characters, and one of my favorite performances ever by a female. She just has the ability to ease into her emotions a lot better. And this is just a role that I think was tailor-made for her. So yes, this film is excellent, excellent, excellent. And Damien Chazelle is just a remarkable talent. He clearly appreciates and loves cinema very much. And the movie's just wonderful from beginning to end, and it reminds us why we go to the movies. It dazzles you one moment, breaks your heart the next, all while maintaining that core theme of realizing how dreams and life don't often go well, and there's often conflict. I'm just glad this movie was made, because I'm very, very picky about musicals. I mean, I can honestly name maybe 2 musicals that I've liked since the year 2000, because I'm such a purist in that respect. But this is the one that I've been waiting for. And I honestly, as I was watching it, I could just picture Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire watching the movie and just kind of nodding in approval. And that's when you know you've done a great job. So yes, that is my review. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, the link is below. And you can also like my Facebook page and link below that. If you would like to watch more videos, you can click here. Oh, and you can subscribe if you feel so inclined.